for joining us here this evening. I'm Jamie Sherry. I'm the Director of Community Development. We do have a couple of people I wanted to point out who are in the audience this evening. We have Mr. Sharp, who is the Board of Supervisor for the 4th District. We also have Matt Brewer, who is on our Planning Commission. We have Mr. Alvarez, who is our acting county administrator, and then our Deputy County Administrator, Joanne Hunter. In addition to them, I also want to just tell you how excited I am to be here with you for the kickoff of the Courthouse Village Plan process at the community meeting. Tonight, we're going to have a brief presentation by our consultant, followed by an opportunity for you all to visit each of the tables and start giving your feedback on some of the information they're going to need to draw from the community in order to formulate the plan. There are sign-in sheets out front. Hopefully each of you did sign in. The email address is critical. You'll get added to our email list and you'll be sent updates as to when our webpage is updated, other opportunities for you to participate. Those will all be on our website, as well as there's a handout that was handed to you when you came in that has email addresses for both of the different villages that we're taking on plans for right now. And you can comment or ask questions, and staff will return those comments and answer the questions and record your comments. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce David Hill from Hill Studio, and he's going to take it over from here.
Thank you, Jamie. Delighted to be here tonight. As Jamie has introduced some of the folks from the community, let me also introduce you to the design team. My name is David Hill. I'm a landscape architect by background, and I'm president of Hill Studio in Roanoke. And we're the prime consultant for this work. And we're joined on this effort by our good friends and frequent partners, Arnett Muldrow from Greenville, South Carolina. So there's only one microphone, so I'm going to introduce the rest of the team here. With me from Hill Studio is Peter Gerardo. Peter and I have been planning together for about 15 years, all over Virginia and many other places. Ross Hamas, junior planner, GIS expert, who has been with us for 2 years now. Aaron Arnett, a planner and senior economist, president of Arnett Muldrow in Greenville. And Sean also is with Arnett Muldrow and is a graphic designer and has made a number of the graphics that you'll be seeing here tonight. So the project that we're about to embark on is a small area plan, and I'll talk to you a little bit about the project as we understand it, and then we'll describe a little bit about the process. So the project is, starts right here from scratch. Good evening, Goochland Courthouse Village. This is just a red line on a map that shows the general boundary of the courthouse village, and even the boundary can be adjusted during this process. We've been retained to create what we call a small area plan, and it's guided by the Goochland County 2035 Comprehensive Plan. And in it, it stated that the courthouse village was a community hub. That it's generally the center of a lot of activities in the community. So as we develop this plan, we'll first start with a deep dive into the economic situation of the county and particularly of this small area. We'll work with you to decide how you want it to be shaped. We call it village programming. What do you want to see in this village? What do you not want to see? Every bit is important. And so we'll start tonight working with you on what you want to see here. That'll translate into village design, how you want the place to look. And it'll have a land use piece and a density piece. How dense do you think we should build Goochland Courthouse Village? Another key piece of this is not only how the bricks and mortar work, but how the place is branded. And Sean will be working directly with you on how you want your village portrayed to the rest of the world. And the project will end with the land plan and design guidelines for the entire village. So these are the building blocks of this plan. Now, you might not have known it when you walked in the door, but we're going to put you to work because we can't do this by ourselves, and we didn't take this commission because we wanted to do it by ourselves, but we want to know what you want. So tonight, with the kickoff meeting, our main purpose is to meet you. And so as we adjourn from this sort of formal lectern in about a half hour, I need for you to go by and meet all these people that are going to plan and design your village and tell them exactly what you want. We've got pens and pencils and Post-it notes for you to help do it. Then February and March will be a period where we do a lot of research on the background of things. And in March and April, we'll be launching a community-wide survey, and that'll be put on a website, which we'll provide you. and you know, it's not only for you, but get everybody that has the least bit of interest in this to take the survey. It's going to be, there'll be some fun questions there. And if you have relatives who've moved out of Goochland Courthouse, they may be living in California, get them to take the survey, because we want to know what other people think about Goochland Courthouse Village and what they'd like to see there. We have a way to slice it to know, you know, who's providing answers from far away and who's from close by. Then April and May, we'll develop some initial concepts, and we'll come to visit you in May. We'll have a midway public meeting, and we'd like to invite you all back to see what we're doing, to give us more direction and guidance. Then we'll refine the design during the summer, and in August, we'll have a final public meeting. Again, you're invited, and you know, hopefully by that time you've told us what we need to know and we've taken your advice, and we'll be back here for a final public meeting and open house. Then in September and October, we'll have planning, commission, and board work sessions and hearings, and we will have this put together in November for an adoption. So about most of the year, the better part of the year, will be working. So now each of my colleagues has got a small part of this that will be describing their work, and we'll start with Aaron, who will give you a little bit about the market snapshot for the Courthouse Village.
Thank you. All right, so all the plans that we do with Hill Studio, master plans, small area plans, we call them market-based master plans because we need to know what the market realities are in a community, what those opportunities happen to be based on market demand so that we can inform the rest of the plan, whether it be urban design, whether it be land use and all that. So this will be founded on market analysis, which we will begin to do. We've actually done a little bit so far, and tonight I just want to give you a little bit of context of what's happening in the county compared to the village that we're talking about here. The county, as you all probably know, the most recent census is just under 25,000 people. So you're small. You're still a rural place. However, if you look at the growth over the last 10 years, the last two censuses, you've grown by just under 14%, which is almost as fast as virtually every other geography in the metro area. So you're small and rural, but you're growing as fast as anybody. So that's very important for us to understand in that the market. Same thing with income. You're growing faster than most of the places within the region, but you also have higher income than most of the places in the region. Your median household income is just under $94,000. You can see on that slide, you're in the blue bar there. You're at the far end of the regional income numbers there in the Richmond Metro. So now let's look quickly at the Courthouse Village itself. It's a small part of your rural county. There's just under 1,800 people that live in the county, live in the study area right now, estimated in 2022. But of course, the public services that you have here serve the entire county. The businesses that you have in Goochland Courthouse absolutely serves an area that's much larger than our study area. And that's important for us to understand, too, as we go through the economic research, because if you look just within a 15-minute drive of where we're sitting right now, there's over 10,000 people that live in that area. So you're small, but you serve an area that's much larger than that. We've done a quick, simple supply and demand study for commercial and retail. And just to give you an example of that, there's going to be a lot more to come. If you look within your courthouse boundary that we're talking about here, there's demand for about $18 million worth of new commercial and retail sales. If we look at that larger 15-minute drive time area, it's $146 million of annual demand that can be served somewhere in the county, certainly can be accommodated. Some of that could be accommodated in this area as well. So we'll be talking with you to learn what you all feel is needed, looking at the numbers that we'll be doing from this market research for the Courthouse Village, the county, and other neighboring communities to understand what all this opportunity really means for you all. And as I mentioned, inform the rest of the master plan. As we go through this, we'll be working with some of the businesses in the core of the community to understand, do a market definition study to understand what that true market boundary happens to be. We'll take that retail study that I've just briefed you on and really expand that, looking at all of the different categories for commercial and retail to understand what those true opportunities happen to be. We'll do the same thing with housing. And understand what is needed here in terms of price point, in terms of housing type, and those sorts of things. We'll also look at employment as well. Ultimately, obviously here in the courthouse, you're a major employment center for the entire county, so that's something that's very important for us to look at. Ultimately, all this data, what you all share with us, will roll into economic development strategies to help us realize the vision of the master plan.
I'm just going to run through these real quickly here. Also a part of understanding the community, just, in addition to the market analysis, is the geographic snapshot. So that's looking at various, what makes up the courthouse area. We call these X-ray maps. It's just kind of looking at the various features of the village that kind of make it give it its identity. For instance, here, this is just an aerial image of showing the existing village boundary. And again, as David alluded to, and as we'll get to later on in this presentation, that can be adjusted just based on what makes the most sense. This is just showing the hillshade, which is showing topographic relief, just kind of an interesting lens. If you've not seen Goochland Courthouse from this perspective, it's interesting just showing the elevation and hills and valleys and whatnot. This is from the 2035 comp plan, showing various different land uses. As you see, it has the blue, you'll see institutional and government buildings. Orange is the flexible space with some residential. Red is the commercial areas. Purple is industrial. It's showing future transportation layers and those kinds of things. In addition to those is the design overlay district, which is essentially what guides areas that you'll have design guidelines for building types and streetscapes, which Peter will get into later on in this discussion. We'll have in the exercise. In addition, looking at parks and public facilities, you have a lot of being the kind of the home base of the county here in the courthouse area. You have a lot of public buildings and parks. And then also looking at existing and future residential subdivisions. As you can see, there are some subdivisions already built out, and there are some, as you see over on the west side, right along the James, Rural Hills, which shows some future transportation that will serve that community. Which can help guide understanding of where areas are currently served and underserved with their utilities. This is just showing a 200-foot buffer around the existing water and sewer lines there. So it just kind of gives you an idea of where areas are could be improved or expanded to based on what needs are available. I'm going to pass this off to Sean. He's going to go over some community branding. There you go.
So community branding, it's an interesting exercise because we're not trying to come into the community and turn you into a Helen, Georgia or anything. We want to come in and engage with you as the community and ask questions and get an understanding of the character of the community, and so that we can create an authentic representation of the community to create more community pride, but also to help promote you to visitors, possible investors, new residents, and everybody else. And so these are some of the other brands that we've worked on in Virginia over the years. And you can see here, yeah, there's a wide array of ways you can approach a brand, but really we want to create a toolkit for the community that will consist of a color palette, the primary logo type with typefaces, the graphic composition, and a tagline that sort of represents the spirit of the community. But that brand is really just a platform that can then utilize those tools within it to build out a larger system. So like in Graham County, North Carolina, you can see how those colors and typefaces were utilized within that county to create unique identities for some communities within there, from Fontana Dam in the top left, Robbinsville in the bottom right, but they were also used for event extensions for some of the other activities that are happening in the community, as well as their the great organization that kind of spearheaded all of this. So those tools can be used for a lot as far as the identities, but they can also be utilized for environmental graphics and wayfinding, and also other swag like T-shirts and hats, water bottles, you know, whatever you want to put it on. The tourism brochure is always great to update. Shopping bags, I mean, the list just goes on. And really, you know, we're going to try to understand through this engagement, you know, how we're going to approach the identity of the Courthouse Village. Here's some ads from there where we're just taking simply that graphic with some photographs, and as we get into the room there in a little bit to talk about some of the elements around the community, we're going to want to know, you know, what are some of these places we need to see as outsiders that truly represent you as a community. And there's also other ways of approaching this. Was a districting strategy in South Forsyth, Georgia, where we had an established county identity that we came in and created more of a district strategy where everybody kind of took their own color from the color palette, and we gave them a custom treatment with the typography. But there are more character districts than they were like city centers or anything like that. But one thing that came out of that that's really important that we know that you already have made some investments in was a bannering strategy. And so this can really help create a sense of place for a community and let people know that they've arrived. It can help calm traffic in certain areas. It can promote events and other things. And with the wayfinding, you know, gateway signs here, there's just a lot that we can do with the brand. But it's really, we want to focus on the authenticity of a brand by engaging with you as the community to get an understanding of what's important to you, what you feel represents the community from, you know, the style, the colors that influence you and inspire you, also the community aspirations, so that whenever that brand is on a T-shirt or it's on a billboard, people get a sense of your community, but it's also true to the nature of the community that whenever they get here, they don't feel misled by something fancy on a sign somewhere. We really want to be authentic to you as the community.
Thank you. Okay, so the next piece is an introduction to kind of visual and spatial character of a village. And we were first delighted, actually, to walk through the lobby and realize the exhibit that's up, Goochland County of Villages, right out the door. And we realized at that point, you know, we're the new people to this. You all have been doing this for a couple of hundred years. The whole idea of small villages in Goochland is nothing new to you guys. It's just perhaps new to understand it in the way that we're trying to learn. So this was a great beginning for us. and if you sort of update a couple hundred years and look into the comprehensive plan that's just been finished, you'll get this initial guidance. Chapter 2, Land Use in Villages. The goal is to have balanced development that contributes to the welfare of the community and preserves its rural character. The county will be characterized by the following: high-quality development, vibrant, healthy villages, high-quality residential development, preserve natural and cultural and historic resources, and all that surrounded by viable agriculture and forestry resources. So, you know, it's a really great beginning and sort of definition of what we're trying to achieve with the village. So I thought, well, let's look a little farther and search the internet for the elements of a village. So if you'll take those 4 words and type them in on Google, you'll get the first 10,000 entries start to look like this. Everybody loves a village. Gamers love villages, and they build villages, and they attack each other's villages. And it's just, so now there's got to be something else. Okay, so how do other people look at villages? And so the next study was a little bit more specific. We asked the Travel Writers Association, where are the best villages in the world? And this is the lineup for the 2021 best villages in the world from the Travel Writers Association. And what I find, a couple things I find interesting about these 7 villages, and one of them is that if you look at them, they all have really defined boundaries. You know, Mother Nature pretty much did this to them, and that's actually one of the reasons that they're pretty interesting to visit. You know, mountains or lakes or deserts, they all have something to do with how these places developed. You know, open space really rules, and it's defined the village in specific districts. Another thing that I find really interesting about this place is that these 7 villages, that they have place-based architecture. You know, you wouldn't expect to find a building from Tibet in the London or the English village, for example, or an English piece of architecture in the Swiss one. And you can tell the landmarks. You know, the town halls or the windmills or the church steeples. They all are a very important piece of that visual composition. Notice what else is interesting. I don't think they put this together, but there's very little signage. I don't think you can even see a sign at this, you know, in any of these villages. You know what else I found really interesting about these 7 pictures is that there's not a single car in any of these villages, which is kind of interesting. There are a lot of boats, but there are not any cars. So it was kind of interesting to me to see what the travel writers thought about what a village was. I know, again, a little bit more serious, we started to look at what urban planners think a village is. And the reason I've sort of did this in this order is that a number of the things that we've just discussed in those travel writer pictures are also what the city planning world thinks about the elements of building a village. First, they have nodes. And what am I talking about here? Outdoor civic places, commons or squares. A great village has great community outdoor spaces. They all have paths. They have roadways, they have greenways, they have sidewalks. A great village pays attention to how that is done, every detail. They're definable districts, and by what I mean by that is they're neighborhoods, they're walkable areas, they're fun places to go around. They're defined by districts. They're great civic buildings that provide visual cues. They're called landmarks. And finally, they're edges. One of the cool things about villages is you can tell where they end. They have a real noticeable boundary. You know, oh yeah, I'm outside of Goochland Courthouse now. Oh yeah, I'm back in it. They have a very noticeable boundary. So we'll just do a couple of visual examples. You know, when I'm talking about nodes, we're talking about intentional public spaces. And of course, Courthouse Village is no stranger to that. A lot of Virginia courthouses have these beautiful courthouse grounds, and yours has a fabulous one. But then this isn't the only type. You know, public spaces can be things like farmers markets, for example, or just sort of large open commons. You know, our country has a history of a lot of these sort of open spaces that started out as for military use, but then they got adapted to things over the years and make them beautiful civic places where a lot of things are celebrated. But the key is, no matter how big or small, the nodes are very carefully planned. You know, whether they're a farmer's market or a festival ground, or whether they're just little tiny alley spaces or sort of big plazas where people can all meet and greet. A great village has paid attention to these. Not only are they have a daytime use, but nightlife, you know, really takes place in a lot of these village spaces. The one on the right is Floyd, which you know, is a small kind of courthouse village, very similar to Goochland Courthouse Village. So we've talked a little bit about nodes, paths. Paths take us from one place to another, and you know, and sometimes paths can contribute to a village, and sometimes they totally detract. And so we have to figure out which are which, and which ones we want to really spend some time designing with your help. In fact, paths you look at how they've changed, the invention of the car has made a great difference in how they've changed. If you look at Seville, Spain, it's sort of a maze of old paths before the car was ever invented, and people say it's quite beautiful. Midtown Manhattan is exactly the opposite. It's a perfect grid made to move people around efficiently and effectively. And if you look at, say, suburban Atlanta, designed more recently, it's more this, they kind of go back to that more casual, pastoral, winding roads. But the difference in suburban Atlanta and Seville, of course, is that the density. Here's super dense. Here, people don't want to walk on these roads because it just takes forever to get from place to place. So much, in fact, that the Journal of Transportation Health has put together a pattern of healthiest city designs, the best on the top, the worst on the bottom, mostly because people in these sort of sprawling suburbs don't like to walk. So we will have to need your help to help us figure out, what's the right pattern of roads for Goochland Courthouse. Is it the more romantic suburban type? Is it more the traditional neighborhood design? Or is it even more the sort of city street grid? You tell us how much of which and just the right doses. It's not only the layout of the paths, but their character. Driving on a country road can be a fantastic experience, and you have to figure out how much of this you want to devote to the car and how much to the person. For example, an example like Annapolis, Maryland, it's about a 50-50 split here. The cars have about half the space, people have the other half. And recently in a lot of European cities, they've said, well, look, if you've got a car, you can have that space from those little cast iron balls over to the edge. The other 3/4 of this belongs to people, and we just have to figure out in Goochland Courthouse Village how much for each, You help me figure that out. Another thing we'll think about is districts, and the one that I thought would be a good example to study recently here, because it's near Richmond, well, it's in Richmond, is, the VCU district, especially the western one. And, when I was growing up, it all seemed like it was a small place around Floyd Street, just a little district there that was VCU's campus. And in about 2000 or so, they made an intentional move, and they call the Monroe Park area now. Monroe Park is our undergraduate campus district. And so they sort of made that district bigger, broader, and branded it the Monroe Park District. And then more recently, with Siegel Center and some of these other things, they've kind of jumped broad, and that whole West End is now considered a district that really works around the university. So it's interesting to me in my lifetime how that particular district has changed. So if you take that kind of district idea and think about Goochland Courthouse Village, is the whole town one district, or are there several districts there? For example, as Ross's map showed, the whole southern area near the courthouse may be one district. There's another up here near Southern States, and even in the building that we're in, there may be another. Help us figure out what the districts are for Goochland Courthouse, because they may have different design meaning. Final piece would be edges. A lot of painters have painted Inverness, Scotland over the years because of how that is bound by edges. Sometimes it's the water, it can be a cliff, it can be the mountains, but many painters have taken on this because of how the village has grown to those edges. A lot of times designers intentionally mark that boundary, whether it's fields or a lake, or maybe even in this case, like the way the road intersects and sort of welcome to our village as you cross the lake. One of the things you do for a village boundary, even if it's not clear, is you sort of put a sign there, sort of welcome to our village. It can sometimes be a man-made thing, or it can sometimes be a natural boundary. So help us find the logical boundaries for the entire village. So Peter will now discuss a little bit about some of the buildings in the village in particular.
Thanks, David. Well, tonight I just want to introduce to you and start the discussion, the conversation about those pieces of your village, the buildings, the architecture. And really the way it'll work is the process over the months ahead. I'm going to go through some questions that we'll, amongst others, but that we'll talk about as we're talking about architecture and design, that portion of the village. And ultimately, it'll result in a design guidelines for the Courthouse Village. Some of the questions that we'll consider, and I think you'll hopefully get your thinking going tonight, and as we break up from here, we'd love to hear from you and get comments and so on. One question, for example, how can the buildings you plan build and renovate and so on in your village create great and memorable places? So placemaking, what are those, how can those new buildings and renovated buildings be opportunities for placemaking? Another question, how should buildings relate to the pedestrian? David mentioned that, but yet still accommodate the vehicle or the motorist. These are things we need to think about and talk about, and we'd love to hear from you. The slides behind me, we're going to just, I've got them kind of loaded with a variety of pictures, and hopefully these will stimulate some conversation. And some of the pictures on our boards as you come through and we talk together. Housing is going to be one of these. Tonight is, so as we introduce this conversation, we'll be looking at varied examples. So maybe there's things you'll say, I like that, I don't like that, and here's why, and so on. Another question, just going through these questions that we want to talk about and have conversations about. What building scale will best fit Courthouse Village? And as part of that question, what range of densities is appropriate for Courthouse Village? Public buildings. Again, we're going to look at some examples, and here we're sort of focusing on a sort of example of a firehouse because we thought that would be a one we could hone in on, but we'll be talking about others as well in our process. Another question we're going to look at, what are the architectural styles, the form and materials that should be defined for Courthouse Village? And we'll also, of course, look at commercial buildings. Another question, how can we plan for new buildings that fit and relate to their surrounding context? So we want something unified that relates to the surrounding context of the village and also the surrounding area.
Thanks, Peter. Okay. So you've heard enough from us. Now we want to hear from you. What we'll do, we're going to adjourn from this more formal presentation, and we'll also be over here by these maps that kind of show some of the existing background. He'd love to hear your thoughts and comments on those. I'll be kind of right in this area looking at some of the outdoor spaces. Want to know your opinions. Peter and Aaron and Sean will all be in that room. Don't forget, that's the better room, actually. They're over there. That's where the action is. It's a smaller room, so it'll be kind of tight in there. But they'll be dealing with the buildings, the economics, and the branding. And so we have plenty of Post-it notes, plenty of pencils, and you'll find we have a number of places for you to comment. That's how we get direction. We're going to take those back to the office, hang them up on the wall, and take your advice. That's the goal. So if we mess up, it's your fault. You didn't give us enough advice. So remember that. So so delighted that we have so many people here. Delighted to meet you all, and we'll be here, and can't wait to meet you more in person.